Part 1.
Well, you have left things a bit late. Have you tried looking for somewhere in Newbridge?
Newbridge? No, I haven't. I've never heard of Newbridge.
Well, let me show you. I've got a map here. Here's where everything is. You come into Newbridge over the bridge, and the main road in front of you is, surprisingly enough, the High Street. This is one of the main streets. And branching off to the left, you can see there is West Street. That is another busy part of town.
I see.
Now, as I was saying, here is the High Street, and here is West Street going left. Now, if you go along West Street, the first place you come to on your right is the supermarket. It's not a very big one, but it's got most things you're likely to need. Next to it, there's the Old Town Hall. I say the Old Town Hall because it is about 100 years old, but it will soon make way for a car park, I'm afraid. I suppose the car is king. Now, opposite the supermarket is the railway station. You can get very frequent buses and trains from here into the university. And next to that is the sports centre. It's a brand new one and was built on the site of some tennis courts, so that's progress. It's got everything the keen sports person like yourself might require. Now, that's the centre of town, and I want to point out to you the buildings opposite the supermarket, but on the other side of London Road. There are two buildings there. The one further away from the High Street is called the Heights, and the one nearer the High Street is called the Towers.
What are they?
They are where you could find a flat. One of them, the Heights, has a number of flats for rent at the moment.
Oh, good.
Now, the first one is flat 4. That's a nice flat with a balcony, and you need to apply to the Newbridge Accommodation Agency to ask about that one. You'll find their number in the phone book. Number 6 is another nice one which has been empty for a while, and you can ring the owner directly, I think. Yes, I've got a number written here. There it is.
Right, thank you.
Good. Now, number 8 is a re-advertisement.
What do you mean?
Well, it did have a tenant, but now it is for rent again, so I'd like to ask about that one. Leave it with me and I'll look into it for you. Then we can talk about it when I've got more information.
OK. Are there others in this block?
Yes, there's number 10. Now, this one's a bit strange. It's advertised with an agency as well as privately in the local paper. Normally, if it's advertised through an agency, you shouldn't really go behind the agency and go directly to the owner. But on this occasion, I suggest you just answer the advert here in the newspaper, which the owner has obviously put in.
OK.
Finally, there is number 14. This is with the New Start Agency. This is an agency started by the girl who was my assistant here, and she left to make money for herself, so she's not my favourite person. But I'm afraid I would have to advise you to go through the agency anyway. Again, their number is in the phone book. All right. Is that something for you to be starting with?
That's great. But, what kind of place is Newbridge?
It's a nice place. It was developed about 100 years ago, really for people who worked in the factories around there. They were clothing factories and everyone worked in them. Men, women, boys and girls. Then when the factories closed down, things got very difficult for the town. There was a huge amount of unemployment until a few years ago when, in the telecoms boom, a company making mobile phones started up. I think your phone was made in Newbridge. And now this company employs most of the people in the town. There are new housing estates on the edge of the town, but they are mostly occupied by young families, and there isn't much student accommodation there. Most flats and so on are in the centre.
That sounds good.
Well, let me know how you get on.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Anne.
What have you been doing?
Oh, just sitting around, catching up with some reading.
I've had a great time. You know we're doing this assignment on... What is it?
Museums, their costs and benefits.
That's right. Well, I've been to the Sandgate Museum. It was really good. These local museums are really interesting because they connect people with the history of one special place. We all know about kings and emperors and battles and wars, but local museums tell us about the everyday lives of ordinary people, and that's why they are so important.
I'm not so sure about that. I think they are of interest, but they're so small that they can't give a true picture of things. They do their best.
I don't really agree. They do give a true picture, but perhaps not a full picture. It's the truth, but not the whole truth.
I think the size is the number one problem. Because they're small and local, they attract few visitors. That's why they have so little money. And because they have little money, they can't buy or maintain many really interesting exhibits. As a result, the shop is almost as big as the museum to try to raise money by selling souvenirs, postcards, sweets and so on.
I think they find it difficult, but not impossible. And don't forget, they get a lot of their exhibits free from local people. There was this boat, for example, that was fantastic.
Really? What was that?
There was a massive fishing boat, a real one, about 100 years old, and you could walk on it and get the feeling of what fishing in those days was really like.
Oh, sounds quite good. But I've always found that these kinds of museums are a bit dingy. For example, the display cabinets are so dark that you can hardly see the exhibits, and the labels are sometimes difficult to read.
So, coming back to our assignment, what we've got to decide is whether these museums should be funded by the government or just by local people.
I think it depends entirely on what kind of museum it is.
How do you mean?
Well, take local history museums. They're small, so they won't survive without financial support. But that should come from the local authority, since only people in that area or tourists will visit it.
I agree, but what about big natural history museums? Surely they should get money from the central government.
Why? Children who want to learn about nature can go out into the countryside with their school teachers. They could survive from donations, and they get loads of visitors anyway. The state should spend more on science museums, since not enough people are studying science these days.
I'm not so sure, but I do think a sort of museum which should not get public funds is the craft museum.
Yes, like museums of cotton weaving.
Yeah, which are of interest to only a very small number of people, and they should pay for it.
I agree. But a working farm is a different thing again. That's something from all of our pasts, and so it's important to the local community. Kids can learn a lot too. That's the sort of thing that the local government should be spending its money on.
Yes, I agree. Well, I think we've got plenty of ideas for our assignment.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2. Part 3.
I'm going to begin my lecture today with a look at product life cycles. Now, as we go through the product life cycle, I'll be trying to raise some issues which are important with regard to each phase of the cycle. I won't have all the answers for you this morning. This one of the lecture series is just to get you started and, I hope, interested. Let's start with the first phase of the cycle, that of product design. This is really the most important part of the cycle. We often talk as if it is consumers who are responsible for recycling, and so they are. But in reality, the major responsibility must be borne by designers. They can design products where recycling is easy and cheap, or difficult and expensive. In the latter case, the likelihood is that recycling, though technically feasible, will not in fact take place. Now, don't jump ahead, because the second stage is not product manufacturing, but rather that of materials acquisition. This is the activity we do when we mine coal or other minerals such as gold or iron or copper. In addition to mining, there is harvesting, which includes the cutting down of trees as a first step in the making of furniture or paper, or fishing. These activities have costs, which are not only money costs. Pollution is one of the extra costs. We have also to think whether the resources we use are renewable, such as trees, or not, such as coal and other minerals. The third stage is not manufacturing either. It is materials processing. This is where we take the raw materials and use energy to change them into a form that can be used in manufacturing. For example, trees must be turned into paper, or oil into plastic. The cotton plants that grow in the fields must be turned into cloth. All of these activities require the use of chemical processes and, as with all chemical processes, waste is produced, often of a dangerous kind. And now we come to the manufacturing stage. This is usually the most expensive in terms of cost and energy and waste. The wastes are often those that contribute to global climate change. For example, we make 41 billion glass containers, mostly bottles, each year, and we throw most of them away. A lot of manufacturing seems unnecessary if we could only organise things better. And this could mean greater profits for the manufacturing companies too. Stage 5 is packaging. Many products are packed in paper or plastic, which themselves, of course, have their own processes and costs. Excessive packaging is often criticised, but it must be remembered that packaging serves a purpose, often more than one purpose, such as maintaining freshness and hygiene, as well as providing information. In our globalised world, we must never forget the next stage, which is distribution. This is the stage where transportation and energy play a big part. Lorries, trucks, trains, planes and ships all use up the precious stocks of oil and, as we know, generate greenhouse gases which, as we hear again and again, contribute to climate change. Stage 7 is the point of it all. Using the product. Looking after products, using them in the recommended ways, timely repair and maintenance all reduce the need for early replacement and reduce the number of products in landfill sites. We should not encourage the purchase of single-use products, that is, products which are designed for use on one occasion only and then to be thrown away and replaced. I'm going to skip a stage for a moment and move straight on to the final stage, which is disposal, putting the product in the bin. This is the end of the life of the product, and we lose it completely. It may have only a little value, but it does have a value even at this stage of its life, even in fact when it's actually in the landfill site. Now, I missed out one stage. This is a cycle within a cycle. That is, within the life cycle of the product, there can be a closed-loop cycle which can extract more value from the product. This is the reuse and recycle loop. It is a closed loop because, in theory, it can continue forever, though in practice, of course, this is not possible. Recycling products means that they can be used to make more of the same product, CDs, bottles, books, or that they can be used to make different ones. For example, 1 pound of recycled paper can make 6 cereal boxes. And if we recycled all our newspapers, there could be a saving of 40,000 trees a day. Now, with this approach to the life cycle of a product in mind, we can go on to consider life cycle analysis.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.